What's going on, Dragons? Happy Friday, and welcome to another episode of the UrCast, your weekly Friday night Magic pre-show. I'm your co-host, Cory, and with me this week is the man who looks slicker in Icker, Mr. Dylan. What's going on, Dylan?
Yo, how's it going, guys?
Desk height now.
Oh yeah, here. Hey guys, how's it going? Dylan here, and yes, I finally have a desk. We can finally stop being in the floor. And tonight is going to be a very different kind of Urcast because one, I'm not going to be able to participate as much in today's topic because it's not something that's applicable to me. So to make up for that, we have our first ever guest on the show.
Yeah, guys, so we have our first guest, Cole. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Cole. I'm a longtime friend of Cory, longtime listener, first-time guest, and
First-time caller.
Thankful for you guys bringing me on today.
Yeah, for sure. So this week we're going to do it a little different. So normally we would hop into news at this point, but we're going to throw the news out the window because we just got done with CommandFest this past weekend. And I thought we'd hop on, share some thoughts. Cole and I went. Dylan worked, I believe.
Oh, yes, very much working. And also, you know what? I've taken this weekend to get a little bit of reading done. Right now, I'm about halfway through the Critical Role book about Vax and Vex, Kith and Kin.
Is that like a prequel to Vox Machina, or?
Yeah, it takes place before they join Vox Machina. I believe it might be afterwards, but it definitely seems like a prequel book.
Okay. Well, solid stuff. So CommandFest were this past weekend in a couple different cities. So we had them in Anaheim, Baltimore, Edmonton, if you're up in Canada, Indianapolis, and Orlando. We went to the one in Orlando. And then if you weren't able to attend, if you're overseas, any of that good stuff, they do pretty much continue every single weekend upcoming. So next weekend is London, Savoie. I'm going to try and butcher it again. France, and I believe Frankfurt, Germany. And then they kind of hit every weekend, progressing gradually more eastward. So after that, we hit like South America. Then we're going into, I think, Osaka has one. There's one at Adelaide, Australia, so forth and so on. And they kind of hit every weekend until the end of July. But Cole and I went out to Orlando this weekend. It was my second time. Well, I went last year. But they did have one kind of in between this past weekend and the original weekend. Cole, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was your third attendance?
This was my third CommandFest. Like you said, we went last year and had a really good time, so much so that we wanted to go again this year. And I was lucky enough to go to the aforementioned earlier CommandFest about 2 months ago in April. And it happened to be my birthday, so it was a pretty fun weekend. But this marked the Lord of the Rings pre-release, and I think that brought a different energy and a lot more of an exciting energy to the CommandFest gathering.
Yeah, I think it would probably, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I'd assume it was probably also brought a bigger crowd, because the last one was what, March of the Machine was the focus point of that?
It was March of the Machine, which didn't have that one ring.
It didn't, and it was also not summertime when everyone was out of school or taking off work and all that good stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, we definitely know that Lord of the Rings, that brings a certain energy to the Magic the Gathering community. We know all about that, don't we?
Yeah, yeah. And when you're offering $2 million online, you know, that also brings a certain energy. Have you been to other, besides those CommandFests, have you been to other like large gathering events, anything like that?
Well, growing up, I did a lot of the Comic-Cons and Metro-Cons and that sort of like convention center where people would bring Magic. It was never really a Magic-centric festival, but you could purchase cards and people would be playing. The CommandFest is definitely the biggest event that I've been to for Magic, but I have participated in a lot of Friday night Magic at my local game stores here in Florida.
What about yourself, Dylan? Have you made it to an event?
I've never made it to a Magic the Gathering event, but I have been able to go to NecoCon in 2018, and also there's a local Richmond GalaxyCon that I try to go to for one day every year since they started doing it in Richmond. I did miss this year because of financial situations, but hopefully I'll be able to go next year, and who knows, maybe I'll be able to go to a NecoCon or a Magic Fest at some point.
Yeah, I think we talked about it before for the Magic, like the Command Fest and the Magic Cons in your area. I mean, it kind of depends on how much you want to drive because they've had it in Richmond before, but I mean, they did Baltimore this past weekend, but obviously that's more of a trek for you.
Yeah, because with travel prices and hotel prices, I'd rather do something a little more local, you know?
No, for sure. So I think that was the nice thing because Cole and I are both roughly an hour and a half away from Orlando. So I really liked it. I think for the second time going, so it was in the same hotel that we went last time, which was like convention center adjacent, but honestly could basically be considered its own convention center by just the sheer space of it all. But they definitely upgraded from year one to year two as far as sizing, as far as attendance, personalities that were there, and kind of the whole shebang. So I think the clearest way to kind of collect all these thoughts, because I was getting kind of a little bombarded thinking about it, is just taking it day by day, right? So Friday, it was a 3-day event, obviously. Friday, I worked all day, so I didn't get there until late. Cole got there a little bit early. So what was the early buzz looking like when you first showed up?
Well, we tried to swing by the festival about 4 p.m. or so, and there were a lot of people there. Like you said, the convention center is a rather large convention center in Orlando, so they had several different conventions going on at once, and so there was a lot of people there. There were some people playing Magic in the hallways, and it was generally a pretty popular event on Friday night.
Okay, I think. So for those of you guys who haven't been to a Command Fest before, or an event like that, I like it in the sense that it kind of caters to a little bit of everything that you're looking for. So if you're into artists, they've got artists. If you're into creators, they've got creators. If you just want to sit there and slam down games, they've got that too. If you want to just throw your wallet at a vendor, there's plenty there to just scoop up and empty your bank account. So really, no matter what you're looking for, there's a wide variety, and everybody's there and kind of having a great time sharing, their love for Magic. So Friday night we got there. Obviously it was a late for me because I think I got there at like 8:39ish. So we kind of just, I think, got dinner, hit the hay, woke up bright and early for Saturday. Saturday made it across, and then the hall just unfolded before us. Now, I do have one little gripe, right? So I got my pass, and I had a blank pass that was like, I'll see you in 3 days, nobody bother me, right? They stopped me because I bought the one day, and they're like, no, we're putting Saturday on it. So you can't sneak back on Sunday. But then this guy, who happened to get a different I guess cashier, for lack of a better word, or a different attendant, he got the all-inclusive, if you want to make out with the professor, do whatever you want pass, because they didn't put the label on it.
Did I take up on that offer? I'll never tell.
Sadly, missed opportunity if you didn't.
That's true. So when we first walked in, I mean, it was, I would say 9:30-ish. So started at 9. We got there 9:30, 10 o'clock or so.
That's about average for little conventions like this. I know that with most anime conventions, doors open about 10 a.m.
Yeah. I think my first impression was very odd because we were at the first of the bottom floor of, I don't know, like a 12-story building. But the way they had put their lighting in, it almost made you feel like you were outdoors because they had kind of like an artificial coloration to the lights.
It was a really interesting effect that it was off-putting at first, but after getting used to it, it was comforting so much to the extent that when leaving the convention hall, all of your vision was draped in blue. and it was for that what truly was magic.
Oh
also
yeah,
had-
no, I know those light filters, and honestly, it probably also felt weird going to the bathrooms and then coming out into the main event hall.
For me, it kind of had like that casino type effect of like, we're gonna distort your reality of time, because I know at the end of the day it was like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and I'm looking at my phone going, it's 10 o'clock, but it looks like broad daylight in here. It makes no sense.
Kind of like when you walk out of a movie and it's the middle of the day, but it's super dark, and then you come out and you're like, wow, it's only 1 p.m. and the sun's still out. It's bizarre.
Yeah. So we went in. So I was with my wife. Cole, his girlfriend, came along as well. There was both. Well, it was his girlfriend's second, but it was my wife's first time going. But I would argue, even for your girlfriend, it was probably still kind of a new experience, because she was kind of doing a lot more activities on her own, whereas the first time you guys were probably linked pretty closely.
Yeah, we stayed. She came with me to the one in April. Erica is a really great Magic player. She plays a lot of Gruul decks, and we were getting her comfortable. She started about a year ago. Just playing with strangers and kind of getting to know people's approach to the game that is different than our regular play group. And this time around, she had a ton of confidence, and her and Sharon both split off several times and were able to get great games in and, whoop some butt from across the state.
Yeah, so I would probably argue they actually got better luck at finding games than we did. So this guy, this Dylan, I'm gonna tell you right now, and whoever's listening, I'll tell you too. This guy is like the wedding crasher of trying to find games, because we walk in and he's kind of chest puffed out, kind of like a jaunty swagger about him, just walking around going, "Oh, did you two make eye contact?" It was like walking into the grass for the first time in a Pokemon game. Like, you've locked eyes, now you must battle. But then he got turned down like I want to say the first 2, maybe 3 times.
You're doing me a lot of justice there. It was, I think, about 4 or 5 times that our approach was declined.
It wasn't just declined. I think at least the first couple of people, the look of bewilderment they had in their eyes of like, "Oh, you were talking to me?"
It was met with reproach for sure. Dylan, I like we kind of casually walk by a group of, we're a 2-pod. We're looking for another 2-pod. So I would walk by any unassuming group of 2 people and say, "Oh, if only we had 2 people brave enough to play us in a game of Magic." Nobody has the courage, or just trying to egg people on, and I think they didn't take too kindly to my words of a vague threat.
All right. Yeah, no, understandable. But you know what? This brings up a very good question. So, I have never met you or played with you before. Now, I know you just said that you have a Scarab God deck, but you mentioned that your girlfriend is a Gruul player. So, is Scarab God kind of your usual kind of deck, or do you usually play a different play style?
I like to think of myself as a graveyard-based player. I really enjoy using it as an extension of my hand, and so my old reliable, if you will, is a instant and sorcery-based Reanimator, the Scarab God deck, and it has been honed down through years of removing, tinkering, and it's a really fun deck to play against. But it uses a lot of self-mill and instant and sorcery support to create some elaborate game plans throughout the mid-game to the late game.
All right.
Follow-up question. So your girlfriend identifies as a Gruul girl. So are you going to now officially go on record as a Dimir daddy?
Dimir daddy, that might have to be it, but I will I'll keep that one in the back pocket.
Well, because I think Dylan might claim that with Anawan as well.
No, see, I'm more of a mixed bag kind of guy. I just like anything that gives me either a lot of creatures or a lot of tokens to make, but I have noticed that I have a lot of fun playing Naya decks, the red, white, green. So I guess, if I was to label myself as a player, I guess it would be Naya your business.
Ooh.
Would that be your response if you saw this guy strutting up to you, going, "Oh, it looks like you've thrown down a challenge," and you're going to throw that back at him? Well, that's Naya your business.
No, I'd probably be like, yeah, I can grab a quick game.
Oh no, you're already backing off the brand. It's not even.
Yeah, but
I don't know that this holds water. This story seems suspect
but
at best.
he mentioned milling, but he mentioned graveyard, so it's probably a lot more self milling. So he probably wouldn't be a Dimir Daddy. He'd probably be a Golgari. The only thing that comes to mind is Grandpa, but he doesn't look that old.
Golgari grannies. Now I will say that this whole I don't want to say facade or routine, but this whole kind of Jack Sparrow-esque approach did net us one kind of, I think, really cool moment, which was Ken, who you might know from Good Clean Commander. I think both of us kind of chat with him a little bit on Twitter from time to time. So he walks up, right? Here comes Dylan, or I'm sorry, here comes Cole. Big cocky chip on his shoulder, as always, as you can imagine, right?
Having been rejected 3 times prior, I had something to prove.
Swinging his big old deck box as he walks up to these two unassuming guys. I don't know if they were re-sleeving. They were doing something like kind of organizing decks or something along those lines. And he challenges them to a match. They give him probably the most polite rejection possible, which was smell you later, essentially. We're waiting on friends, but for sure later in the day, it's a long day ahead of us, we'll catch a game. We turn around, take a couple steps away, and I just so happen to have seen a picture of this guy not an hour beforehand for maybe the first time in my life. And turned back around, introduced myself. It happened to be Ken, and we were able to leverage that into a later game, kind of towards the end of the day. So it's kind of cool to have a moment where you could meet a creator out there and just kind of au naturel in the wild.
Yeah,
He was a really nice dude.
It sounds like it, and honestly, I hope one day I get to experience that, because that sounds like an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, like Cole just said as well, he was a really great guy. I don't think I ran into anybody that was necessarily negative in the whole day. I mean, I'm sure there was some turd floating around the bowl somewhere in that place, but
there's one at every convention.
Yeah, and you know how it usually goes. It's usually later in the day when their back hurts, they're sweaty, cranky, and their blood sugar's crashing. But I will say, luckily, in 2 different times attending this, everyone's been nothing but the nicest. We have had a couple players that are maybe a little cocky about their abilities, but nobody that's been overtly rude.
It's not that kind of Urza deck.
Yeah, which leads us to the next point, right? So before we go, we're discussing what decks we have and things of that nature. Cole brings up the Scarab God, right? I politely, I think almost angelically, humbly inform him that, you should maybe warn people that it's not that Scarab God deck. To which he goes, no, I don't believe that it's that powerful. This is probably one of the weakest commanders that's ever been printed, in fact.
This is hearsay. I would never say such a thing about him.
Maybe not exact words, but the demeanor was there.
Obviously, if he was going to say that about any of the gods, it would be the Scorpion God.
The best of them.
Scorpion God can afford a little more hate.
So we get there. The very first game we play, he pulls out the Scarab God, and the individual we were playing with goes, "Oh," it's just an audible crashing disappointment. And we had to go, no, it's not that deck. And then Cole proceeds to wildly pop off for about one turn and then kind of come back down to earth.
I thought it was a very fair and balanced game. It did end with a rather large, army of flying zombies, but it's not that kind of Scarab God deck, and I think we everybody had a pretty fair chance.
Oh no, trust me, I get that. On Spell Table, I was playing kind of a lower level game. It was a table for 6 to 7 decks, and one guy quit because in one turn I got like 4 jelly beans off of Omnath.
Okay. So Cole, what deck? I mean, so we played. So I don't want to talk about the Creator Clash. I want to talk about that kind of towards the end because I have a lot of thoughts there. But outside of that specific event, what kind of moments or decks stood out to you the most? Did you see anything where you're like, wow, that was a fascinating deck, or that was a really great play?
Well, the deck that stood out to me the most was actually somebody that we did not play against, but rather Erica and Sharon, who played a really great game against a gamer named V, playing a Transformers tribal deck helmed by the Essica / Prismatic Bridge. And it was a very interesting mix of artifact synergy and interesting combos that took advantage of the kind of strange effects that the Transformers bring to the table. They're a little disjointed, but it was just a very fun showing.
Yeah, I would agree. I wish so that's a game that we came in, I guess, kind of towards the end of V being kind of knocked out of the pod. So I want to say I only saw maybe a turn rotation with them being like active. So I kind of wish that I'd seen more of that deck, but it was definitely really interesting. And I know we kind of talked a little bit about like the potential meaning behind it, which I thought was kind of a nice gesture as well. So yeah, I thought that was a really neat deck, especially because, like you said, the Transformers as a whole are kind of like disjointed in what they all want to do. So seeing all of them meshed into one cohesive deck was kind of unique.
It was cool. The play, in fact, that I remember was involved Diretti, the ingenious iconoclast who has an ultimate that makes 3 copies of any artifact. And there was a pretty sick, nasty plan to use it on the Portal to Phyrexia, which came out in the Mother Machines, which, if you are familiar with, is a rather impactful artifact. So I like the use of all 5 colors to get everything that every color had to offer in terms of artifacts and flip cards.
Yeah, I like that. I think for me, ironically, so the most impactful moment, I'll say, is going to be one we're going to talk about later. When we talk about the Creator Clash, because there was one play that just like in the moment blew my mind. But the one that I remember from outside that was also from a game we weren't involved in, ironically. So maybe we're just not as good at making big splashy plays as we'd like to hope.
Our games are nice and quiet.
Yeah. So when we were playing with Ken, actually, his partner and their friends, because I guess they came in like a 5-pod just because they live in Orlando, were playing a separate game next to us. Well, his partner played a Cyclonic Rift, and then the next person in turn order responded to his Cyclonic Rift with a Vampiric Tutor and some kind of draw spell, which I couldn't figure out what the draw spell was, but he used a Vampiric Tutor to put a mana drain to the top of his library and then draw it to respond to the Cyclonic Rift. And it was like, those are decks that are just out of my league, so to speak, to have that much high dollar, high level interaction when I'm over here puttering around with like out of the box precons and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean that's an $150 stack interaction right there. It goes down a lot faster.
I mean, the good
That's
news is,
also-
like, the draw spell could have been something cheap, but yeah, the Mana Drain and the Cyclonic Rift, that's a pretty penny right there.
Well, especially so. I was talking to Ken for a couple minutes because Cole and Erica had stepped away to go to like a convenience store to get something to drink real quick that was still kind of on site. And Ken sort of saw me walking around and approached me because he was available for a game. And we were talking, and he was talking a little bit about his collection. And I mean, he was telling me how he had like 10 doubling seasons and all kinds of stuff, and he just didn't know, almost like, I don't know how to get rid of them fast enough. Because how am I possibly going to build 10 decks that need doubling season in it?
Well, I mean, if he wants to get rid of them, like, I can't pay for them, but I'll take them off his hand.
Well, so, I mean, there was definitely some raw power and dollar power in that pod.
Oh,
so that was just kind of an interesting thing to look at.
Yeah, no, I honestly kind of get that. Like, I don't win with my decks, but a lot of the decks that I have are actually expensive because I just got kind of lucky with my brother getting a hold of a lot of expensive cards and just kind of cheating him out of them price-wise.
Mm-hmm. What's with the low positivity there? Just casually, I don't win with my decks. That sounds like you're just forfeiting the game before you even begin, my man.
Well, I mean, like, I just don't have the resources for, like, the super crazy combo decks for, like, competitive Magic, and then, you know, when we do our matches, I just always end up drawing badly, and I just never have a board state.
Well, man, I think that sounds like somebody needs to up that land count probably and tweak that draw.
My tummy hurts. My hand is bad.
Up my land count. All my decks have at least 35 to 40 lands in them already.
Oh, you got to trim that down. A smooth 20. That's how you hit that curve. 20 land, 10 mana rocks, 5 mana crypts. Really, 1 mana crypt and 4 copy artifact spells.
God, if I could get a mana crypt or a mana vault.
So we did some games. I think we each got in 3, maybe 4 games throughout the day, which was, I think, is a number that was lower than when we went the first time. So the first time, just Cole and I went together, and I want to say we got like 7, maybe 8 games in. Like, we were just churning them out.
We spammed games like no tomorrow. If the opponents didn't want to play again, we shoot them out of there, and we had people lined up to come up next. So no doubt.
There was no need. There was no need for like such cocky craftsmanship at roping in opponents. We would finish a game. Cole would stick up a finger or 2 fingers, depending on how many people need to round out the pod, and they just kind of like materialized into the seats. It was really impressive. I don't think that was the case this time around, even though I felt like there was more people. But I think it was because there was more people like committed to doing Lord of the Rings pre-release stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do kind of like is that it gave us more free time to explore other areas. So I was kind of curious because you did more with the vendors, more vendor work than I did. And I think I did maybe more stuff with the artists. So I was curious what your experience was with the vendors, kind of how the trade-in process worked for you, if you'd recommend it to other people, or maybe tell them to shy away if they're going next week.
Yeah, I was a little every CommandFest that I've gone to, I've brought a trade binder with the intent of trading cards, but it's either just hasn't worked out, or maybe the lines at the trade-in areas were just too long for me to dedicate time that I could be playing Commander to waiting in a line. But this time around, I came with kind of a goal. I had a binder that I had set out and taken a lot of cards out of my, collection that I don't use or sit in a binder that were over $5 on like TCG Player, with the goal of consolidating some of my smaller, cards that just have no need to hold on to into a something on the reserve list, so which will hold value theoretically into the future, as well as just a card that I've always coveted since I made the mistake of not buying it right before COVID and the price shot up. So I did come out of that with a Gilded Drake.
Yeah, I know that whole thing. I've heard of people at my LGS going to like these sort of CommandFest things or just big tournaments and saying, I just started with one card and I was able to trade myself up to one of the original dual lands.
That's pretty amazing.
That's that's like those videos where you see them where they're like, I start with a basic land, and they just walk around like, what do you give me? What do you give me? So if you start with that and you leave with like a taiga, let me know, because I'd love to talk to you and figure out what magic silver tongue you have. But yeah, it was interesting to watch. It was also interesting to see how thin that binder was by the time you were all said and done. I think it's fair to say that if you went into, or if you're going into one of these things looking for maybe like top dollar, it is not the place for you, because the vendors are really looking for, they're trying to make a profit, obviously. So they're trying to bring in as much as they can, flip it, and I possibly also ideally leave with as little inventory as possible.
Yeah, like
it's worth stating
you're trying to scam
that
them, they're trying to scam you.
I don't know
if they say scam, but yeah.
Well, I don't mean
I
don't mean like actually scam, but I know that everyone's trying to get a little bit more bang for their trades,
right? Which is just the nature of the beast,
They do offer you more for their store credit rather than cash. So they'll give you a number that is your however they estimate they could give it to you, and still make a profit on it, like you said. But then if you are going to turn around and put that money back into their business, they're willing to give you a little bit more. So I think the rate was something like 1.2 times the cash amount. But it felt like a good enough deal to me, considering that a lot of these cards were things that have just, I collected over the years in booster packs, and maybe a deck was printed a couple years ago that uses them, and now it's just, it happened to be a foil uncommon that's, now sitting at $11 or $12. They can give you, maybe $5 to $6 for it.
As opposed to just it parking space in your binder.
Exactly.
Yeah, now I will say you almost had a better deal. Like I think you had a solid deal in the fact that you left with the cards you wanted, but I think people would be interested in how you could have, if you were a less moral person, left with 3 times the Gilded Drakes you wanted.
Well, it was, when I told the gentleman that I was interested in picking up a Gilded Drake, and they, opened up their glass binder, and there was, or, their glass protector of cards or whatever, or their high-end case, and pulled out seemingly an infinite supply of Gilded Drakes, and handed me 3 to rifle through with my Cheeto fingers and drop on the floor and scrape on my anything, my Velcro. So I was able to choose which Gilded Drake I want, and I obviously picked the one that I wiped my Cheeto dust on. No, I got a near mint Gilded Drake, but holding $750 worth of Magic cards for any extended period of time is unsleeved is a little bit stressful.
Yeah, the unsleeved part. Oh my goodness, that just hurt my soul.
Yeah, that was my experience. I think one of my biggest takeaways from the first time we went last year is I remember coming home, and at the time, Sharon, my wife, was just getting kind of into Magic. Like she had like 1 deck, and she was kind of dabbling with it. And I remember telling her, like, I walked up to a vendor who had a plastic case sitting on their table, and it had a Tolarian Academy, all the original dual lands. I want to say it had a Mox Emerald, a Mox Jet. It had like 3 or 4 Mox in there. And I remember telling her, like, nobody was around me. Like, the vendor was on the far side of their table with their back turned, the whole 9 yards. Like, I could have been like this and 1 40-yard dash away from retiring early.
Well, lucky for them, you found the kindness in your heart.
Yeah, because that was the one thing that struck me as weird, but also to be honest and to be fair, I don't think you're in an area that has the clientele that's going in to swipe all those things. They're more enamored to kind of be like in the presence of those items, because what are the odds you're going to go see another Black Lotus lying around or something like that?
At the end of the day, I think we're all intrigued by history, and a lot of those older cards are just fun, like you said, to be in the presence of and to see that people have put an effort into maintaining them. Some of them are, older than I am, and it's a fun place to be when everybody's excited and the energy's buzzing. They're making
it's almost weird to say that you would have like sentimental value over A, a piece of cardboard, and B, a piece of cardboard you never owned. But it is kind of like that. Like, you have like sentimental value, the fact that you see somebody with a Power 9 there in near mint condition, like one piece of plexiglass away from your dirty fingerprint, smudging it up. And
I mean,
I don't know. It's sort of like the Magic the Gathering equivalent of like, I could almost pick my nose and wipe my booger on the Declaration of Independence if it wasn't for one little thing.
And I mean, the Power 9 and those original dual lands are so popular and so ingrained into the community that people paid $1,000 to have a chance to pull one they could not play in actual events.
Yeah, I don't know that we want to get into that one. That's a whole other can of worms. But yeah, I mean, it is definitely interesting. I think one of the other big things I really enjoyed is they did have a number of artists there. I wanted like 5, 6 maybe. That just kind of had like their own little artist alley down one row. We did get an opportunity to kind of chat with a couple of them. So I got to talk to Ben Hill, who is like newer to the Magic the Gathering artist scene, but he's popped up in the last couple years, starting with some of the Commander Legends Baldur's Gate products. So you might know him when they did Brothers War. They did sort of like those artifacts, kind of Da Vinci prototype drawings. He did some of those. So he did like Chromatic Lantern, Cage Sun, a few of those. So it was nice. We got to talk to him for a couple minutes. Kind of hear a little bit about what's going on in his life, his neck of the woods. Apparently he lives like in the area, so I could see him anytime I want to get anything signed I want for free. I mean, he didn't say that, but like his eyes said that. You know what I mean?
If you build it, they will come.
Yeah. So I was happy that I got a couple like really nice prints. I got a Chromatic Lantern and a Cage Sun in that art style. He was actually, what's funny is he was I don't want to say disinterested, but he was definitely more like, I don't know, he was working on something on his iPad, so he was kind of like, he was having pleasant responses to my questions, but he was very much like, yeah, you can go away now. But his assistant that was with him, or whatever role she had, she was above and beyond engaged. So she actually got him to sign both the prints and didn't charge us for it, even though I think he was charging like $5 a signature or something. So that she just threw those in, and then we didn't get a chance to pick him up on this, but then as he kind of saw that she was a little more engaged with the fact that we were talking to him, and he didn't have a line at that point, so we had that kind of window without kind of screwing over somebody else's time, that he was offering like, oh, I up to play a game later. I play right there at the tables around my booth and all that kind of stuff. So we didn't get a chance to do that, but it was really cool that he was kind of like even willing.
All the artists that show up, I think, are really it's such an excellent experience getting the chance to connect with these people that make beautiful art for the game that we love, and that we're able to come and kind of support them and show them that we appreciate the cards for more than just the words, the mechanics. There is a beauty to the hours that they put in. and getting the chance to just go and say, hey, I love your cards. Like, please, could you sign this for me? I think it is a great way to show, your appreciation for the game.
I will say they all, for the two that we interacted with, like in a longer sense, they were both very, even him who was very, you could tell he's kind of maybe like a little socially awkward with the setting, because maybe it might be only his first or second convention, something like that. I believe his assistant had said. They were very like grateful that people were that passionate about the work they definitely spent a lot of time and effort in. Now, I did have one experience meeting with Ben, or Mr. Hill, or whatever we want to call him, that Cole did not, and I think this gives me like a one-up in credibility going forward in all of Magic the Gathering, which was, I'm talking to Ben, right? If you can paint this in your mind's eye, Dylan, I'm there at the booth. I'm talking to Ben. We're high-fiving. We're hugging. Maybe there was a kiss on the cheek involved. We're making dinner plans, the whole 9 yards. The professor walks up. He's at the other end of the booth, right? Now, he's just kind of checking out the prints. I had just bought those at that point and been signing them. He's looking at the same prints. He's starting to kind of like get that buzz, like, oh, the professor's here. And you can kind of see like the congregation drifting towards him. Well, they got in my way, and I needed to go see something behind the booth. Like there was an additional print I wanted to look at. So I had to use this hand, this very right hand, and say, oh, excuse me, professor, and kind of just gracefully move him aside while he stepped forward, while he was getting, praised and worshipped. So I think at this point, by like Magic bylaws, this must be dipped in amber. This right hand must be dipped in amber until we can do like a Jurassic Park cloning sequence and make wild, rabid professors off of what skin cells might potentially be on here.
I mean, do you want anyone to buy Magic product ever again?
I mean, this hand, it can't be touched anymore. And I don't know if it has his skin cells. It might just be like, the corduroy. There might be like a microfiber of corduroy somewhere in one of my palm crevasses.
If you could clone that vest, even that would be enough.
Yeah, that's really it, right? That's all I need.
But you know what? You guys talking about talking with the artist and all that stuff and getting like the free signatures and things like that. When you were talking about that, it could not Magic related, but
Sure.
convention related. It just reminded me of when I was at Richmond Galaxy Con, and I just sat there and talked to Jason Marsden. You might know him as Kovu from Lion King 2, Max Goof from the Goofy movie. And I just sat there, he had no one around waiting, and I just talked to him for like 30 minutes about all the different things I've watched him in and how much like meeting him meant to me and things like that, and just how much I enjoyed his work. And the guy's autographs were like $50 to $60 a piece. He just grabbed a picture, signed it, gave it to me, no charge at all.
Yeah, and I think so. That's something I definitely
I do love that. Some not everyone will do it, but people in these types of communities, like if you show support, like they're willing to, take a little bit of a dent in their paycheck to support their fans. And again, not everyone will do it, but it is cool there are some people that do.
Yeah, and that's something, the reason I wanted to hold off talking about Creator Clash, I still want to do, because I think there's one or two other things I wanted to run through real quick about our day. But put a pin in that, because that was something I wanted to kind of discuss when we got to that point. There was something that kind of like, I don't know, it touched me in a way, but I don't want to like delve into it and then miss my other trains of thoughts.
Yeah, of course.
So the other artist we got to meet, and I think like Ben, so Ben was pretty chill, really nice guy. Like I said, he seemed a little like aloofish, but overall nice guy. Had a decent kind of small crowd around him. And then you look to his left, and there's probably the longest line of any line other than the professor's meet and greet in that entire freaking convention hall. Because Alayna Danner was there. She's done a lot of stuff. So if you go on Scryfall, type in her name, I think she's at like 80 plus cards. Most notably, she's done Jeweled Lotus. She's done Odawara Soaring City. She's done quite a few basic land cards. She's done, I believe it's Radiant Grove, one of the green-white kind of dual lands. So she's known for a lot of like really amazing work, really fantastic landscape pieces. So we got to go meet her and talk to her twice because Cole kind of went once, and then we circled back with our significant others a second time. In fact, she actually did. The reason we came back the second time was we found out the promo cards you get, which are like Lord of the Rings themed reskins of Tranquil Thicket. She did those promo cards, so we went back around to get those signed as well. But talking like of amazing people and very just kind with their time artists, I think she was really like the pinnacle of that entire idea. I don't think I saw her cut a single person short. She had very thoughtful conversation with everybody. She mentioned, for example, she was from Seattle. So when I came back with my wife, Sharon, Sharon's lived in Seattle. She's got siblings and family that live there. And she was kind enough to take the, I don't know what card it was or if it was just a generic, because it wasn't a artwork that was recognizable to me, but she took one of the Ultra Pro play mats and was showing my wife like, oh, well, there's a specific city park in Seattle I like to go sit at. You might be familiar with it. That's where I get a lot of inspiration from my artwork. So if you look at this artwork that had deer and whatnot kind of going through like a wooded motif, she was showing like, oh, these are like the white-tailed deer that you see in the area and kind of breaking down the whole scene. But she really amazed me for somebody that had such a long line that could easily have been like, scribble, scribble, next, scribble, next, and had some assistants in there with like a square chip reader. She was one that I mean, the time, effort, and just kind of overall give back to the community really impressed me.
Oh, yeah, no, I was lucky enough to meet someone like that before as well. Cole here, first time I interacted with him, he doesn't know my hobbies besides Magic. He's only been here with the cast, but
it's all Card Fight Vanguard.
So at one of the Galaxy Cons I went to, Austin St. John, the original Red Power Ranger, was one of the guests, and getting to sit there and talk with him while there's this line, and he's not trying to get anyone to, move along faster, and just being able to ask him a few questions and talk to him. It was kind of the same experience there.
Yeah, because he was the original Jason, no?
Yeah, Jason.
I'm sorry, Cole. I think I overtalked you.
Oh, it's a starstruck moment. It's really cool to be able to sit down with somebody who you've looked up to for a long time like that.
Now, I will say on another note though that the reason why we have to be careful what we talk about with Cole is because I think the Pinkertons may be coming for him at any time. Because he was grilling her for corporate secrets, and I'm pretty sure I saw like a little Mark Rosewater doll sitting on the corner of her table that like the eyes lit up and kind of started scanning his face.
It was blinking, the blinking eyes.
But no, we had like a little moment when we were talking with her where she brought up that on her travels over, she had been working on an art piece for an upcoming set. And I will say this, Cole, and I appreciate this a lot about you. You're somebody that it was like, you don't shy away from opening the conversation. So when she says that, your instant instinct is, well, what can you tell me about it? Not in a rude way either, just sort of like, could you tell us what's set? Can you give us any breadcrumbs? And she very politely shut you down. But even that, I think, was like one of the sweetest shutdowns I've seen out of anybody. That was, haha, no, I can't, but wink, wink, it could come out next year.
She also told us a really nice anecdote about how when she was designing the Jeweled Lotus, which is a pretty iconic card at this point, an instant CEDH staple, and it sees a lot of play elsewhere. how she was really interested in trying to, give her friends a little bit of a hint, but couldn't do it, and had to keep one of such a amazing card secret for quite some time.
Yeah, I want to say she said it was delayed like 2+ years, some like ridiculous number where I would be blabbing my mouth to everybody I know.
All right, you know what? Wild guess, just off the top of my head. You know what?
Mhm.
You said this person created Jeweled Lotus. You said
Yeah.
that they're working on art for a possible future
Okay.
All right, hear me out.
Black Lotus has already been done.
Unjeweled Lotus for the next unset. You tap it, sack it, give your opponent 3 mana of 1 color.
I think Unjeweled Lotus would be like tap, sack, and give 3 colorless.
Bejeweled Lotus.
Bejeweled.
Now, I don't know if they could get
different.
away with calling it bejeweled. I don't know if that's a trademark term or not. But dazzled Lotus.
The jewel encrusted Lotus.
Minecraft Lotus.
Jeweled lettuce.
So, speaking of anecdotes, I think this is more your story to tell than mine, Cole, but you did hear her kind of explaining a little bit about the process of card selection and how they kind of like how the artists and the cards kind of got married together as far as who does what.
Yeah, Alayna Danner was. She mentioned that when she recently just had a Secret Lair release, like an artist series, which unfortunately, if you were interested in picking it up, I believe the last day to order was on Saturday. But you can always, find them on TCG Player if you use my affiliate link in the description below. But she was talking about how they were in communication with her as like, hey, we'd love to have an artist collaboration with you. They being Wizards of the Coast. And they were able to like come to a consensus about a list of cards that both Alayna was interested in, doing the art for, and they weren't so busted or integral to the community that it took up maybe slots for other artists to have those powerful big name cards. And she told us about how she was able to design the new art for her first commander, which was just a really beautiful story about how getting into Magic and her being an art student, she was able to combine those two passions. And then now, several years later, to be able to redo your favorite, your first commander, that's a powerful moment.
Let's hope that these are not trade secrets we're not supposed to divulge.
I mean, she was pretty openly divulging those. I do remember she also mentioned, and I forget what artist it was, but I believe she was talking to you actually at that point, because you mentioned having some other cards signed.
She spoke about Mark
Poole. Yeah, so it was Mark Poole, and how kind of interesting it was that when she was in art school, she actually had a textbook or a drawing book by Mark Poole, and then in later years be able to kind of work with him hand in hand. It was very like a surreal moment for her. Also, she had great things to say about all the other artists. Every artist, Mark Poole, Ben Hill, anybody else who was brought up, love him, great person, great this, which always speaks very well, I think, to the future of Magic. Because if they were saying like, well, I can't stand this person or that person, it's probably not the most harmonious working relationship. So it was very nice to kind of see that they were all, like, they all had mutual appreciation, at least for each other's work.
That they're willing to say publicly. Nah, I'm sure they all love each other.
Yeah. It's
but
weird,
you know what?
It's weird that you mentioned that, because there was a bunch of people that came up to me and they said, oh, thank God Dylan's not here because you're the one that we like. And I was like, listen, guys, I know, I get it. But, publicly, I also like him.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very believable story.
You can read all about it in my memoir.
But you know what? I will say, though, that is one thing about Magic that I enjoy over some other card games I've played, where the cards will credit the artist that drew them. Because I know a lot of people complain about Yu-Gi-Oh! You don't know who drew what cards.
Yeah. Yeah, because the Yu-Gi-Oh! It's all credited to the author of the manga.
Yeah. But
Um,
with Magic the Gathering and a couple other card games, it'll tell you this card was illustrated by this person, and that gives people a chance to look up their other work that's not related to the game.
mhm. Yeah, especially like Ben Hill's a good example because when I looked him up in an attempt, so I took a picture of the prints and I was attempting to like tag him in them as like a credit, and I ended up linking into his website, and he has so much fine artwork that's like not magic related, but it's more like art gallery portraits and stuff like that. That it was kind of interesting to see things outside of like this is one facet of his career, but now you can kind of appreciate the whole breadth of it all.
Yeah, and
Um,
you know what? Another thing to mention with that though is that the art that they make for Magic could be completely different from the rest of their their portfolio.
Mhm.
And I know that some of the artists that work on Magic cards, I can't remember exactly which one, but I remember one time seeing where someone was complaining about the cover of this book, and I thought the cover looked nice. And then I looked at the guy's other artwork, and I saw a Magic card that I was familiar with. I was like, oh, that's really cool that this guy has this Magic artist making the cover for their book.
Yeah, and I think obviously the most famous example of that is Stasis, because Stasis was actually drawn by Richard Garfield's aunt, and honestly I can't remember her name, but I know she used to have a exhibit at the Met as far as like a cubist surrealist kind of like fine art exhibit, which is why a lot of people remark how Stasis doesn't look like a Magic card because she made it look like her modernistic artwork. So yeah, it was definitely fun. I enjoyed that aspect. Even if it was just 5-10 minute conversations here and there, it's always interesting to feel out other people's passion for the community, and it's always nice to kind of get that from the head down because the three of us can be very like, oh, I love the game, I love the this, I love the that. But if the person at the top, the Mark Rosewater, the artist, the Gavin Verhees of the world, aren't passionate about the game, it'll inevitably kind of like wither on the vine because their creative juices stop flowing. So it was nice to see that they're as equally ambitious about where they want to go with the game, as excited about the direction everything's going as kind of people on the ground level are, so to speak. Um,
Well, and
now,
from a collector standpoint, it's also, I think, worth mentioning that the artists often have proofs,
mhm.
which are if you're not familiar with what proofs are, it's like when the artists submit their art to Wizards of the Coast, they'll send sample cards to show them this is what the art is going to like, this is what the card is going to look like with everything on it. If they need to make any adjustments as far as placement and that sort of thing. And so these cards are kind of like sought after, collectible pieces because they're, unique. They're not technically Magic cards, but they're something that, goes beyond Magic cards, or I don't know, something to that effect.
Mhm.
But backside is is usually a blank, like a white slate, and some artists will do sketches or alters or
Mhm.
any small little extension of their signature on that backside for you if you ask, and typically have to fork over a pretty penny.
Yeah, now you got when we were speaking to Alayna, you actually picked up a couple that were a little different than that, though.
I did. I picked up one of the pathways. Alayna Danner did a lot of art for the pathways and one of the secret layers that's come out. And the pathways are those lands that on one side they're an untapped green
Yeah,
land,
the
and on the
MDFC
other side
lands.
color. Right. And so I picked up both the Clearwater pathway and the Murkwater pathway, which is two sides of the same card, but on either side of the card there is a reflective, essentially oil slick style, like just beautiful backing on it. And so they together form one card. But they're just very unique. And Alayna Danner did mention that was one of the only cards that she's received that has that treatment. And I think it is because it is the double-sided card, so both side gets foiled or something.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering after the fact if that was the reason why, because technically there would have been something printed there, which would be the other half of the card. Because I think the other reason why they don't put the traditional back on is they don't want people to confuse them for Magic cards, and also that way the Magic licensed stuff, like the logo and things they have copyrighted, aren't on there, and it also helps them like avoid copyright issues. Because it's not like I'm on the DL selling Magic the Gathering merch. But yeah, so we did get some swag from there. You got those. My wife got a signed playmat. We also picked up signatures on our Tranquil Thicket altar promos. So it was overall a nice experience. Now I think onto the thing let's do this. Let's take a quick break, and then when we get back, I want to talk Creator Clash, because I think that was the thing that to me was the most impactful, or the most game-changing aspect to this one as opposed to the last one I went to. So we'll take a quick break, grab some water, and then when we get back, we'll have a fun little chat picking up. What's going on, Dragons? It's your resident deck crafter, Cory, and I'm here with our very first ad read? Well, yes, I am. And I'm here to tell you to check out our sister gameplay channel, Chaotic Commander, hosted by my good friend John. Do you like crazy brews, zany house rules, and a chaotic good time? Well, then it's time to spin the Wheel of Fortune and Chaos Warp over to the Chaotic Commander YouTube channel. Join John, Dylan, and myself as we invite you into our Wednesday night pods where things are anything but normal. You can check out the Chaotic Commander on YouTube today.
Well, now that you guys are back from watching whatever sort of ad slot was here, or the blank spaces, we still don't have ad reads, we are ready to talk about what I believe Cory was saying was the best part about this whole endeavor of theirs, which is the Creator Clash. And before we get into that, I just want to say, I wish I could clash with some creators right now. There's a lot of Magic creators I would love to be able to just sit down and chit-chat with and shoot the S, because I still don't know if we're going to be PG or not, so I don't know if I want to say the full phrase there.
Now I have a question. Whenever you guys play against each other, isn't that basically a creator clash?
Well, what he means is, like right now, he's going to hear a doorbell ring, and then there's going to be a black screen on this side as I step out of frame, and I'm just going to sucker punch him as soon as he opens the door.
Joke's on you, I don't have a doorbell.
Joke's on you, I don't have a door.
Also, don't go knocking on my door. I got to go downstairs to answer that, and that's a lot of work.
All right, guys, so we're back. We talked about some of the things we witnessed, saw, all that good stuff, but now we want to get into the celebrity of it all. So there was a lot of cool creators there, a lot of interesting events they put on, and some of the enhancements they kind of brought to the overall event. So last year when I went, I mean, they had a couple creators, but they just kind of were present, I want to say, for meet and greets. But beyond that, they just kind of maybe moseyed about. I guess you could challenge them to a battle if you wanted to. But nobody that was really like doing anything specific. So it wasn't like, hey, how should I put it? There wasn't anybody that was like, hey, I'm here to fight, or I'm here to hold this event, or anything like that. They just kind of were like present for meet and greets and whatnot. Now, this event was a little different this time around. So they did have, I want to say, bigger names, not to trash anybody that showed up last year, but they seem to have like more kind of mainstream names. They did have the meet and greets, but they added in like cosplay contests. They added in like a more structured ability to kind of challenge some of the creators specifically, things of that nature. And it seemed to be run mostly by the creators, which I thought was pretty cool. So I think Cool Stuff Inc., who sponsored the Orlando specific event, obviously had some hand in it as well. But MTGNerdGirl, who is obviously a very popular streamer in the space, she seemed to be very hands-on with the kind of creator aspect of it, kind of doing the creator class, doing the cosplay events, things of that nature. So she seemed to be a lot more hands-on than I think I was expecting. I don't know if you kind of noticed that as well, Cole, or...
I did. She was active in a lot of different, she had her finger in a lot of pies, you could say. And that is kind of flavor for the Lord of the Rings pre-release. But there were a lot of times that she was helping other, groups within the, staff atmosphere. Like she helped us with the creator class. She was helped signing up people. She was helping with her own booth that had, I believe, Talia Vess and JohnLikesGames, were all like having merch at the same table. She was helping assist, like run that. I mean, she was rather involved in the process.
Yeah, which was, like I said, was kind of unique to me because, obviously, so I've been to other conventions, not Magic the Gathering, but I've been to other, like, Tampa Comic-Con and stuff like that, and it's weird that you would see, like, the quote-unquote talent being involved in, like, the administrative aspect to it. But you're right, there were moments where she was behind the desk at the computer signing up people for Creator Clash. When it was time for the cosplay competition, she was kind of like, not the MC, but the one that was kind of liaison between the MC and the judges and kind of working the crowd, so to speak. So you could tell she was a lot more hands-on than I was maybe expecting, but I think it was a positive thing because a lot of times when you go to these events, they seem very regimented as far as like, at this time this will happen, at this time that will happen. And I think it gave a bit more uniqueness, so to speak, and it almost made a lot of those creators feel more accessible because they were out and about amongst the crowd, not necessarily behind like my booth with a stack of 8x10 glossy photos or anything like that.
Agreed.
So one of the things I wanted to bring up at this point, and this kind of circles back to what Dylan was saying, when it came to was it Austin John?
Yeah, Austin St. John.
Austin St. John, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was really struck back, or I was taken aback, not just in this event, but also with kind of our experience, and Dylan, you can kind of reflect on this too, our experience the last couple of weeks making this podcast. So this is our 5th episode, technically our 6th upload because we split the first one, but our 5th episode, so we've been doing this for, I guess 10 weeks at this point, roughly.
Something along those lines.
And I've been kind of just a little overwhelmed almost with like the kindness a lot of these people have. So when you talk about like Austin St. John, right, and how he took the moment to do like a small gesture for you that really made your day, but cost him nothing in the long run. That's kind of the vibe I get from a lot of these people, because a lot of times when you look at good gestures in life, they kind of fall in like 3 buckets, so to speak. One is kind of like the habitual manners, I guess, for lack of a better word, bucket, which are just kind of like learned traits. Like, I held the door open for you when we walked into the store. I, hit the button on the elevator for you instead of stepping back and making you do it. Stuff like that, that's just sort of like learned traits, but at the end of the day, it kind of makes society run smoother, but you're not like blown away that somebody pushed the 11 button on the elevator for you. So you kind of give like that cursory thank you, and everybody kind of politely moves about their day. On the opposite end of the bucket, or opposite end of the spectrum, is the like large grandiose gestures, right? Those are the ones that kind of fall into like your proposals or you're I'm starting a fundraiser to raise money for somebody, or you're doing some like large scale, maybe above and beyond gesture. And sometimes, not always, obviously those are well intentioned, but sometimes those also come off as a bit of like, I want recognition because I'm going out of my way to do this big gesture. And if it falls flat, like the person you're doing it for is indifferent, you feel kind of like have that feel bad moment. But it's the kind of like the middle ground that I think is the most impactful that a lot of these people seem to really have focused on, which is the minute gestures that are taking time out of their day, but it's not really like they're going out of their way to do something nice. It's not really a grand gesture or a small gesture. Things like, hey, if we reach out for feedback on the podcast, we've had people respond to us as far as creators. When we were there at this event, I mean, Cole was there when I spoke with Ken. We just showed up, and I think we passed him 2 or 3 times throughout the day. And every time we saw him, he was like, I didn't forget about you. We're going to have that game, stuff like that. Whereas he could have easily been like, be gone with you, or I'm too busy, or like, I forgot about you. Or he could have also just honestly legitimately forgotten about us because it was like 10 hours between, the initial interaction and us having the game. But the fact that you take the time to do those things, to remember those faces, to then carve out that little bit of effort, I think is like, it's really meaningful. And that was the vibe I got from a lot of these creators, right? Which was they're excited to share this space with everybody. But at the same time, none of them acted like, oh, I'm above you, right? Like I've got 10 million subscribers on Twitch or anything like that. They were all very human, which was kind of like surreal-ish, but also, I don't know. It was very like impactful for me in that sense.
Yeah, no, you know what? I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, it's not anything that I've personally experienced because every time that I've managed to be able to talk to a voice actor or something like that, they do always seem like genuinely glad to have the support from the fans and all of that. Because, you know what? They're there for us as much as we're there for them, because without the fans, they wouldn't be famous. They're only famous because we enjoy the work that they do. But I have heard of some people having instances where they met a content creator or like a voice actor where the person just had the attitude where it's like, oh, I'm the important one in this exchange. You don't mean anything. You're just another run-of-the-mill person giving me money for this autograph. But then there's the ones that will sit there and talk with you and make it seem like there's no disconnect because, oh, you're someone super famous. I'm just someone here who enjoys your work, but they still talk to you on a one-to-one basis instead of like they're up on a mountain and you're down in the valley.
Yeah, which I think, that was our experience, I believe, with everybody we met there, regardless of like big channel, small channel, Joe Blow, nobody, vendor, everybody in between. All the artists we spoke about, we had amazing conversation with. They were very, I think, humble and very, they acknowledge the fact that sort of like it's a symbiosis, right? Like we're there for them as much as they're here for us. But this is going to sound like really cheesy, but I was genuinely touched. So we went to sign up for Creator Clash, right? And when we first walked up, they kind of told us like, okay, we're there as a 4-pod. Obviously, they're trying to do 4 pods, whereas, one creator and like 3 other people. So most of the people show up in like pairs, basically, because you're not going to Orlando really by yourself to wander this event by yourself. So they were really looking for like the 4th person to kind of slot into those holes. So when we showed up, initially the gentleman that was signing us up asked, hey, are you okay maybe splitting up and each of you individually, we'll find you 4 different games and you were like the 4th person in each game, which I think we were all completely fine with. My wife was maybe a little a little hesitant because it was her first time going to one of these events, and she was like, I don't know if I want to be by a bunch of strangers. And she doesn't follow as many content creators as I do on this front. So she was kind of like, do I want to be with a bunch of strangers and a person who's going to be like, hey, obviously you know me, and she's going to go, I have no clue who you are. So there was like an apprehension there. But overall, we were going to split up. Well, while we were waiting, we look over to like the meet and greet booth, and GirrafaNat was there. Great person, great. She's obviously does like Twitch, she does cosplay, stuff like that. And that's somebody who, as we've been getting into this content journey and kind of reaching out and trying to ingratiate more into the community, she's been someone I've talked to a lot on Twitter and stuff, as far as like, for me, it's important. So, sorry, I'm gonna ramble a little bit, but it's important for me that we're being conscious of the impact we're making on the community, right? Like, I don't want to just churn out clickbaity, like top 5, whatever. Which no disrespect to those creators, but it seems kind of like I want to be able to enhance the community a little more, and kind of like really feel like we're bringing value. So a lot of the conversations I've had with other creators have been on that front. So I recognized her because, we've been talking for a couple of weeks, just like small talk, stuff like that. And I really wanted to meet her. So I think there was a moment where Sharon actually looked at me, because I was kind of standing there, like I saw she was there. Everybody else was kind of more focused on like, okay, I'm signing up for Creator Clash, and you let me know when the table's going to arrive. And I had that like little puppy, like rocking back and forth, I gotta go out the door look. So we walk over there, meet her. It was really nice. I will say, I learned that I probably need to change my profile picture on Twitter because it's not my face. So it was really weird to be like, to a lot of these people to go like, I'm Cory, I've been talking to you for weeks, and I know you because I've seen your face. And they're just going, I know you because I've seen a cartoon of a rabbit wearing a magician's hat. But what was really sweet was she was wrapping up her time, at this like meet and greet. Now there was nobody around. She was kind of like, whatever. I think my time's up, or there's a minute or two left, and she kind of like instantly adopted us as her pod, based off of that 2-second like, hey, nice to meet you. I'm Cory. We've talked before, and she kind of like clicked who I was. Just gave like a polite, hey, I need to use the restroom real quick if you don't mind. But she stopped. I'm not going to say she cut us to the front of the line, but she definitely walked up to one of the organizers and was like, when I get back, I will be playing a game with these people. And she was even willing to do a 5-pod, which Cole graciously bowed out of for everyone's sanity.
Yeah, I couldn't let everybody else take the fall, so I opted to do an individual game.
I've done a 5-man pod before. They're not as intimidating as they seem, but they definitely are a bit consuming. They are time consuming. They're a bit more to handle. But yeah, no.
But I mean,
you know what? Before you continue on,
sure.
You mentioned how you've been talking to a lot of these creators on Twitter and stuff like that. And I don't know if any of them are listening, but unlike Cory, I, Dylan, am socially inept, and I'm not good at starting conversation, but I would love to talk to you guys as well. So, our socials are always in the description. If you want to have a chat, I'll chat as well. Just know that it's going to be hard for me to be the one to start the conversation because I am socially inept. I do not know how to start conversations, especially with people I don't know. I barely know how to start a conversation with people I do know.
But I think the honesty is very telling on that front. But for me, I don't know. I think it meant a lot that she was like kind of willing to. It seems stupid. Like, I don't know. It seems stupid, I guess, to a degree, to go like, she's at an event. Of course, she's there to play games. But it seemed, I don't know. It was very touching to me that she was willing to kind of like extend that offer, and also kind of like further those bonds based off of what little conversation we've had online. And that's something that's like really stuck with me since we've left. So that was Saturday. So Sunday we didn't stay for Sunday. We all kind of like parted ways, made our way back home, that kind of thing. But it's stuck with me the last couple of days. Just so you guys know, we're recording this on Monday, so it's been about 2 days. It stuck with me the last couple of days about how it's like an unnecessary gesture, right? Because when we walked up and said, "Oh yeah, we kind of casually threw it like, hey, we just signed up for creator class," she could have easily been like, "Oh, that's awesome. You guys have fun." And it would have been no harm, no foul, right? Like I wouldn't have thought any less of her, anything like that. It just would have been one of those average conversations you have with 99% of the people. But the fact that she took a small gesture like that, to me, was very touching, so to speak. And it sounds like sappy, but I've noticed that a lot of the community creators in the space are very much like that. And it's kind of like, I don't know, it's been overwhelming to me a little bit on how supportive and open a lot of them are. Because I've talked to like the Nitpicking Nerds, I've talked to Voxy, I've talked to GirrafaNat, like people of all different levels, I guess. And it's sort of like, no disrespect to you, Dylan, right? But I feel like, at least on my half, I feel like these are the people that are they're people, right? So I'm not going to hold them on an altar and say they're like holier than thou. But it is sort of like, these are people that I feel like I don't compare to, right? As maybe not a person, as a content creator, things like that. And the fact that they're willing to take such small gestures to keep their community thriving is something that really is like stuck with me. Especially when you look at, we've come from the Pokemon community where the odds of you or I reaching out to a large Pokemon creator and them having ever reached out to us again was like, oh, I found the winning Powerball numbers, on the gutter when I was going to work today.
Yeah, no, like we both came from the Pokemon community, and the only time I ever had any interaction with one of the big content creators that I can recall, maybe I had another one reply to something I sent before. But I just remember one time just putting a screenshot on Twitter and tagging Numb Nexus because I was doing a random double battle. Sure. And my lead was Pelipper in a Zoomerol. So I was like, oh, I've got the Nexus lead. And he liked that tweet. And that is probably the only interaction I had with a big Pokemon creator.
And even that, not to detract from him, right? Even that is sort of like you recognizing him or kind of like offering something to him, right?
Right.
What I think is different and kind of like odd to me in a sense is the amount of creators I've had reach out to me. Like, I felt like I was almost letting us down a little bit on Saturday because I was meeting all these people and I don't think I mentioned to a single one of them, like, by the way, I also have a podcast. It was just sort of like, oh, it's been a real pleasure to meet you,
Yeah, and you know what? Like, I kind of understand what you mean with that, but also, there's nothing wrong with just enjoying your time with those creators and not trying to shill yourself out. Like, obviously, the shilling is always nice for growth. But,
yeah, and I will say, like...
maybe next time.
Yeah, next time I'll print out branded t-shirts or something. But no, like... For example, like GirrafaNat, right? So we had our game. By the way, awesome game. I'll get to it in a second. But we had our game, and I didn't realize this until maybe until we got to our hotel room, basically. So maybe, I don't know, 4-ish hours later, we go back to our hotel room. I'm kind of like perusing Twitter and Instagram and stuff a little bit, like looking at the CommandFest hashtag just to see what people are posting. And after the game, she was following me on Twitter. She had put up photos of us and stuff, having a good time that she had gotten from there was some guy kept popping up, I guess, from Cool Stuff Inc. that was taking pictures of the game. So it was kind of it was weirdly surreal to be like, Oh, now they're following me. But I think so. Cole, what? Because you were out of our pod. So what was your game? Because yours seemed like it was a more high level from commanders.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked. I really wanted to get a chance to shout out JohnLikesGames, who is the creator who I got paired with, and two other very nice gentlemen. But John was very welcoming, and just his main concern was making sure that we had a good time. We all kind of sat down. It was clear we've all played for several years. We weren't busting out pre-cons. So we talked about. John proposed, we talked about what turn we wanted the game to end by, which I think is a great metric. I mean, yeah, you hear all the stuff about like, oh, my deck is a 7 or, power levels, but it can be a little bit more like see-through to say, hey, I want the game to be finished by this point. I don't want us to sit here for 2.5 hours, throwing big beaters. We want to, get this game going. So we opted for a game that would go about 7 to 8 to 9 turns, which is like a pretty, a fast timer in a casual game. But it was a great game. He played a Karametra deck, which is a Theros god. It was a lot of ramp, and he ended up getting a pretty devastating Vorinclex Voice of Hunger pretty early. So that kind of was the pivotal, boss battle of the game. But we had a very fun time, trying to best that challenge until the boy sitting next to me played Perforos and started pinging us for 24 damage a turn. We were all working together, man, but our game ended pretty quickly, and I was able to, kind of watch over the shoulder of your pod and see how y'all were playing with GirrafaNat, and overall, I had a great time. And John did hand out several tokens, like custom art tokens, and he was just a gentleman. So it was a great time.
Now, I do have a question, like just on your as for lack of a better word, like what was your feeling? Because you said that when you sat down, I believe you mentioned to me that like, because of the randomization of it, where it was sort of like, hey, whoever was available, you sat down, you didn't know necessarily who John was from his content, but you also didn't, nobody at your pod did either, right?
It's a little bit of an awkward moment, but I think at the end of the day, we were all, excited to
play a great game.
A creator and get to know them, and it gave me a reason to look up his channel and give him a follow, and I suggest anybody listening does the same. He's a really nice dude.
Yeah, and I think that's also what this comes down to, right? Is like, even if you don't necessarily know their content, because there was a lot of creators there that I was not aware of, like necessarily what they did as main content, and they all seemed like they were great people having a great time. And I've looked up some of them after the fact and found out like, oh, this person lives 30 minutes away from me and they do streaming, and this person does that. And, like I said, I was talking to Ben Hill and found out he lives about an hour away. And it was kind of interesting to find out that we had this surprisingly robust creator community in sort of like the South Central Florida region that I was blissfully unaware of. But yeah, I did like the fact that even like when you were telling me this, I did like the fact that even though you didn't necessarily know John, that he was very like willing to cater to what kind of game you want. And GirrafaNat was the same way. Like when we sat down, so when we first sat down, she was off to the restroom, so she was like maybe a couple minutes behind, and I'm sitting there and I'm shuffling up my Hello deck, which is like my most souped up deck. I'm over here like, oh yeah, now's the time to crack this bad boy open. I haven't used it all day. This is a creator. It's going to be some like insane, power complex game. So she sits down. She flips open, like I guess they're like quiver cases or something, like these little roll ups that fit 4 or 5 decks. And she just individually pulls out all her commanders and goes, okay, well, I've got this. What kind of stuff would you be interested in, right? Now, we're sitting there. I'm in a pod with Erica and Sharon, right? Who both know their decks really well, but they don't necessarily know new commanders they may not have interacted with ever before. So she's kind of like pulling out decks like, all right, I've got my Namada deck. I've got my, well, like Squee and what's his face? Slimefoot. Yeah, Slimefoot and Squee deck. I got my this, my that. And they're all kind of like aristocrats or beater decks. And then, I'm sitting here shuffling up like my strongest deck. Sharon's shuffling Neali, which is a straight out of the box like Boros Precon. I believe Erica was pulling out Dihada, I want to say. Which, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's her like most, like, this is my most competitive like power scale deck.
It's pretty juiced up. It has full tricks in there. Yeah.
Right. So we're looking at this, and she's like, "Oh, well, pick what you want, right?" And then she casually throws out, "Or I also have the Sauron Precon that I just bought like a little bit earlier, right?" So we all wanted to see that, and she's like, "Okay, I'll bring it out." As she's bringing it out, I'm over here like shamefully pushing and hello back into his deck box because I'm like, I can't run this. It's got Torment of Hailfire, Demonic Tutor, Delayed Blast Fireball, all this stuff in here. So I put it away. I bring up Brina. Erica did the same thing. She kind of like put hers away, and I think she went for Faldorn at the end. Sharon just, all right, whatever. I got a round the box precon. What do I care, right? So we had a blast. She swapped out for Saruman as like the backup commander, as the main. But we had like a great game. It kind of ran all the way to the end in the sense of like, if she hadn't won on her turn, I would have won on the next turn kind of thing. So it was a pretty fun struggle. I've never seen Ghostly Prison do so much work because I got a Ghostly Prison out on like turn 3. And then everybody, for whatever reason, just kept, I'm going to use all my mana except for 1. And then I realized I don't have enough to pay for Ghostly Prison. So I had Brina up to like 18 power at one point. And she ended up winning off of 2 things. So this was like my favorite, hands down favorite play of the weekend. So the way Saruman's worded is the first instant or sorcery you cast on a turn, you take the mana value of it and you amass Orcs X, where X is that mana value. So she went and cast a Blasphemous Act for 1 red mana, but because it's technically a 9 mana spell, she amassed her Orc with 9 extra counters on it. Now, she already had an Orc that was at like 7 counters, I want to believe. So it shot up to 16 on the cast trigger to survive the board wipe so that she was the one person left with everything. It was just that and my Brina that was, I believe, like 15 toughness at the time. But she just went and board wiped all of Faldorn, who had maybe like 15 things out. Board wiped Neali, which had a ton of Goblin tokens out. And then she goaded my Brina so that I was forced to attack and knock out our significant others. But it went like right to the very end. And when I say right to the very end, I mean like this. I top decked. So I was playing I had 4 mana open. I top deck. Oh no, she cast a spell that had us both draw. I top deck Ink Shield, but it's 5 mana. I only have 4 mana open. She rogues passages her Orc straight into me to win. But if I had 1 more mana, I could have Ink Shielded and then gotten her back on the next turn to win. So it was like that razor thin of a margin. But probably one of my favorites, I can honestly leave that game and go like, that was probably one of my favorite games of Commander I've ever played. And not just because of who it was, but the fact that there was such a like power struggle and big plays. And I think that's also part of the reason why I'm kind of feeling like as I leave this, I'm kind of like my mind's spinning a little bit because it's like, I'm hungry, like thirsting for more of those games. And it's like, well, if that's the level that these people bring to every game, I mean, hot damn, I got to be in this, you know? But yeah, I couldn't be like sweeter people. And then obviously she took photos with us afterwards, which I will say is more than John ever did.
John offered, he gave us tokens. So at the end of the day, it's almost an even exchange.
Yeah, it is an even exchange. And granted, I asked for the photo, so it's kind of a trade-off. But yeah, I think, and then after that, we played with Ken, and we kind of just moseyed around a little bit, and then called it a lengthy day, and then he ended up getting a whole other game in at the hotel bar.
LobbyCon.
But that's kind of it, guys. So that's our thoughts from CommandFest. Cole, did you have anything else you want to add? Dylan, do you have anything else you want to add?
Oh, only thing I was going to add is that just hearing this story and hearing about your interactions, it makes me really glad that I picked this game back up because, as we heard, the Magic community, at least with the right people, can be very welcoming. And that's one thing that a lot of people have troubles with in different fandoms is finding a welcoming space. Like, I never really interacted with too many creators back when I used to do Pokemon stuff because I didn't really have the space to interact with people, and the people I would have wanted to interact with probably would not have interacted back with me. But here you are talking about these big creators that were willing to talk with you, have a game with you, and it's just really great to see that people who enjoy this hobby are able to enjoy it together.
Yeah, I think, and I agree, right? Like, I think, and maybe it's a little sappy of me, but I was really reflecting on it like pretty heavily last night. I think when I was kind of thinking about, okay, we're doing this episode today, I was sitting there kind of reflecting on it pretty heavily about, like, it was a great memory of a great weekend. Obviously had a ton of fun with my friends. I got to meet people that I've only interacted with online. Ken found out he lives in Orlando. His friends that he went with live in a city, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour north of us as well. So it's not unforeseeable that we will see him again. But it was, I don't know, it's very surreal for me when I was sitting there trying to compose these things that these people are just so giving of the community, and it's almost like I feel like I'm not worthy of the time and attention, so to speak. So obviously, thank you for everybody that's invested, whether that's creators, whether that's whoever's listening right now, whether that's Cole right now with his time. Thank you, Cole, because he could easily, right now, it's 10 o'clock our time, he could be asleep. He could be playing the Switch. He could, whatever he wants to be doing. He could be doing anything but this. But the fact that he's taking time, and even Dylan, you're taking time to kind of go on this partnership with me. It's a whole. It means a lot, right? Like it's a gesture that isn't necessarily a grand gesture. It's not necessarily but it's not a non-existent gesture. But it's a small gesture of your time that just could change the trajectory of someone's life, or could change the trajectory of their day even, or you don't know what they're going on in the moment. So, I do agree. I think that's a very sweet kind of mindset a lot of them have. Cole, you got any thoughts on CommandFest?
Yeah, closing thoughts. I just want to say if anybody is thinking about going to an event like that and they're trepidatious, that, you should absolutely take the jump and do it. It's a really great place to meet a lot of people who are excited about this hobby that we all love. And the only way to, get deeper into it is to go out and meet people and have those conversations and play those games. And it's definitely worth the experience of it all. So I would encourage you to give it a shot.
Yeah, check it out. I don't think anybody we've spoken to that's gone to one of these events has gone to regret it. Like, they always talk very highly of the people they've met, the games they've played, the cards they've picked up. So, now you might meet the occasional grumpy dud out there, but they're few and far between, trust me. So jump in the deep end, have fun. Worst case, you walk around, you say hi to somebody, ask for a game, they tell you no 4 times, and then you have a better game with that 5th person. But we're going to move on to card of the week, question of the week, and then I think we'll be heading out of here. So question of the week.
Oh, no,
So
before we jump into that, again, with the content creators and all that, thank you for being so welcoming to my co-host here. And again, if you ever want to shoot the S, like I said, get in contact. We don't have to talk Magic. We can talk other things. I like Zelda. I like Pokemon. I like Power Rangers. We can talk about other things. But if there's any creators out there that want to just get more involved with our part of the community and either help us out or just be good friends, me and Cory, our DMs are always open, and we would love to talk to you about whatever.
Yeah, or if you want to be arch enemies, I mean, I'm down for that too. I'll have a Yugi Kaiba, rivalry with you to the very end.
And I'll just be Bakor. I'll just be in the background until I just jump out at the very end. It's like, aha, I was the important one all along.
You're a Mokuba at best, and we know it.
I actually met Mokuba's voice actor. Very nice.
Oh, there you go. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Voice acting community, also a great community. Question of the week. So this question of the week comes from Renee, who had some thoughts or remarks on our last episode, which was regarding our mono-colored commanders. So Renee says she really loved the mono-colored commander deck techs and would like to know, when you're picking out commanders for you personally, what criteria do you use? Cole, why don't you start us off? So what kind of criteria do you use when selecting a commander you want to build?
Well, you got to have like good art that you can kind of get behind, because if it's something that I'm not, interested in representing, I can't find the motivation to play it too much. And then I also like cards that are, multi-dimensional, that you can take them in different directions. So it doesn't end up just being the, EDH top 100 list. You have a lot of room to express yourself in the deck building process.
Yeah, I think that's good. For me, I like to pick things that are maybe like unique. So for example, maybe you've got a lot of +1/+1 counter decks because they exist. There's a ton of commanders that do it, but each one has like a slightly different flavor. So I like to find ones that have like a unique twist to it. Like Shalai and Halar was one we were talking about that I was playing this weekend. That's +1/+1 counters, but it's not necessarily in order to make big beater creatures. It's so you can ping people with damage. In the same sense, I really like in Hello, which is Spell Slingers, and there's probably 1,000 better Spell Slinger commanders, but he comes with his own like unique flavor to it. So I try to find ones that have like a uniqueness to them and something that hopefully doesn't also duplicate something in my collection, because I don't necessarily want to have 10 Spell Slinger decks, because I definitely will not give them all the time that they deserve. What about yourself, Dylan?
Oh, so when picking a commander to play around, for me, it's all about... I guess I could say it's all about the abilities, but it's not just me looking for strong abilities. It's just me looking for ones that seem fun. Like, I picked up the Strixhaven Golgari deck. I'm like, oh, Dina seems like a fun commander. I love the life gain, life drain, and aristocrat build. I went on to talk about how one of my favorite commanders is Anawan Ruin Thief, because I love mill and go wide strategies. You know what? I have had a lot of fun with the Obun Landfall deck, because I just like the way that deck works. And, Raynar the Ever Watchful, with his whole thing about making spirit tokens every time that you exile a card from play. And it's just like, these are just... They might not be the most powerful abilities, but they're just ones that seem fun for me to play. And it's like, yeah, that's how I choose my commanders. It's like, does this look fun to play? I'll build a deck around it. Doesn't matter if I can't make a strong deck. I just like fun abilities.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too, which is one of the things you got to look at is very early on is fun versus power. So if you want a casual game, it's not bad to necessarily pick a power commander, but pick something that you're going to enjoy as well. Because if it's, let's say, a grindy commander that's very powerful, but you don't want to have a grindy game, maybe it's not the best commander for you. So, yeah, definitely. I think those are all good things to look at.
Yeah, like
mechanics have fun, cool art and stuff that would interest you about the deck.
On that whole fun versus power thing, you mentioned on Halo.
Mm-hmm.
And with that same precon, I bought it as well, but instead of using on Halo as the commander, I liked using Cormella because I liked the pay 1 tap, get Grixis, use this to cast spells. When Cormella dies, you get an instant or sorcery back from your graveyard to your hand.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was a fun little ability. And before I was using Cormella, I tried to make Parnice work because I liked the whole thing of, Parnice gives all of your stuff ward, so now your opponent can't really destroy your stuff, but I stopped using her because it was that other ability where anytime you copy a spell, target opponent copies that spell as well. It's like, I don't want to give my opponents free spells.
Yeah, it's almost like a pseudo demonstrate kind of thing.
Yeah, like, Parnice would probably be good for like a group huggy type deck where it's like, I'm giving you these cool abilities, but you have to pay more if you want to target my stuff.
But yeah, I'll say great question, Renee. So yeah, find something that just kind of fits. Think about the game you want to have, kind of backtrack from there. I would say if you don't have the card, don't be afraid to use, there's a ton of online deck builders. Don't be afraid to try those out before you necessarily invest in the paper cards, because maybe, you play a couple games, Goldfish a couple games here and there, and you find out it's maybe not the most fun play style for what you were looking for. But yeah, just think about the kind of game you would want to be stuck in and select from there. Card of the week, Cole, as the guest scion of the Ur-Dragon. What card of the week do we have this week?
Well, it was a pretty open-ended topic. I could pick any card, and I had to go with one of my favorites that's been released in the last couple years.
Oh, Soul Ring.
This is a basic forest. I'm just kidding. But this is Lier, Disciple of the Drowned. It is a blue, and 3 colorless for a legendary creature human wizard, a 3/4 that states spells can't be countered and gives each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard flashback. Flashback just tells you that you can cast that card from your graveyard by spending its mana cost. It gets exiled after you cast it, so it's a one-time use gig, but that kind of limits the card from being too strong because anything that you get your second use out of isn't coming back into your graveyard. This plays really well into self-mill strategies, which I do play my Scarab God deck pretty frequently. And so I'm filling up my own graveyard and basically getting a hand that I can capitalize on any point in the game. I have a lot of instants that I use with this that are very fun, any sort of cantrip, but primarily rituals like Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual. Instead of just generating, an additional 2 black mana, now you can cast the Dark Ritual from your graveyard and get an additional 2 mana, going up to 4, and Cabal Ritual and things like this. And you can have some really big plays with other stronger cards like Entomb or Reanimate or Rite of Replication. Because I don't know about little known feat of Flashback is that you can pay additional costs, such as kicker costs. So with Rite of Replication, you're making 1 clone copy of any target creature, but you can pay the additional 5 and kick it to make 5 copies from your graveyard. Giving you a lot of fun room to interact with cards that people might not be expecting or just might not be ready for. It's also worth stating that spells can't be countered. The first line of text there is pretty relevant. My favorite thing in Magic is calculating long and drawn out plans that have a lot of moving parts and can be easily disrupted unless your opponents say no when I ask if they have any response. And this line of text guarantees that your game plan happens pretty much right on schedule. There's a couple little cool interactions that you can do with Lier that kind of get around this. If your deck is prepared for it, spells not being able to be countered doesn't even stop you from hindering your opponents. You can use cards like Hullbreaker Horror and turn every cantrip in your graveyard, like a Brainstorm, into a bounce spell, which can effectively counter if your opponent doesn't have the mana to continuously recast these spells. And there are other cards like Urtai's Meddling, which puts delay counters on the spell, or Narset's Reversal, which does the same thing, countering without really countering.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is a cool card. It's a staple in a lot of Spellslinger strategies these days. And like you said, in Reanimator strategies too, because a lot of the Reanimator stuff, as far as cards, is very creature focused. So having something that can help you reanimate your spells, especially in a self-mill strategy, goes a long way. It's Chef's Kiss. But I think that about wraps it up, guys. One little bit of housekeeping before we hop into our outro. This episode is going to be coming in a little earlier than normal. So we've been uploading at 5 p.m. On Fridays as sort of what you can listen to before you go to your Friday Night Magic.
We're the pre-show, like pre-show. When people go to sports events, they tailgate and drink before the game starts, and then they drink during the game. This is kind of your Magic before you Magic.
Yeah, so what we're going to start doing is we're going to try and release these at 5 a.m. Eastern time on Fridays. So it'll still be your Friday Night Magic pre-show. It'll just be Friday Night Magic pre-show in the morning. So you get a full day to kind of digest it all, where you're not rushing to listen to us before you go curb stomp some little 8-year-old at your LGS.
If we're moving this to the morning, though, like we need to be like morning radio DJs. We need like some sort of name.
Welcome to the morning zoo. Bow, bow, bow.
Like introduce yourself. It's like Cory and the dog.
Are you the dog?
Well, Inazuna, the first word of that Inu is Japanese for dog, so.
Hey, listen, I'll call you the dog. It's okay.
But you know what?
That'll be the new thing.
Before we go to the outro, though, you all had some stuff to say about Lier, and you guys said all the really gameplay stuff with it. But one last little comment I want to make about Lier is, I always forget this is a creature from Innistrad. Every time I look at this art, I think Theros, but then I just see that werewolf with the red behind him, like, oh yeah, this is from Innistrad.
Yeah, it is Disciple of the Drowned.
Yeah, but I mean,
cult of Runo Stromkirk.
Yeah, but like just looking at the art, I always think that this is someone from Theros, and thinking that this is like
she's sort of like just in the water, like a Caliphie kind of thing.
Yeah,
I got that.
Let the record state it is a dude.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. Okay. Well, I would honestly,
I'll recess the art.
I don't know. I was just going off of the name. Lier just sounds like a very woman name in my head, so I just defaulted to woman.
Sure.
Magic lore. It's on the wiki. It's on the wiki.
Yeah. Which, you know what, if you want us to talk more about lore and stuff, let us know, because I've been thinking about adding that to the channel as like a sub-series, but I just don't know if I want to take the time to do all the research and you guys not be invested.
Okay. Well, leave that comment down below. But that being said, guys, we're going to go ahead and get on out of here. As always, if you have any question of the week, any comments about Dylan's Storytime Hour, anything like that, you can always reach out to us both on the channel with a thumbs up, with a comment, or we are able to be located on all kinds of different platforms. You can reach out to Dylan at Inazuna, that is INUZUNA. I'm Cory. You can find me at Sleevecard. Cole, do you got anything you want to shout out, or they can find you on the streets?
They could find me on the streets. I got an Instagram. It's at Father Toad. But otherwise, just give these guys a like and a follow and a review on Spotify because it goes a long way.
It does go a long way. And if
you
you want to
know-
reach out to the pod itself, you can find it on Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff at UrCastPod, or you can reach out to contact.urcast@gmail.com. And of course, we're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that good shebang.
You know what? I think I will find him on the streets. I'll walk up to him and then I'll just pull out my duel disc and be like, it's magic time.
Duel.
All right, guys. Well, have yourself a great Friday night magic. I hope you don't get land flooded or screwed, but we'll catch you next week.